hello to everyone out there. So I'm so excited about the interest in this webinar today, and I'm so excited to see where everyone's coming from in the chat box. And I also just personally want to, hope that you're all staying safe and healthy during this time of a public health crisis, and I hope you're taking good care of yourself. And I think one of the things that you are doing to take good care of yourself is by being here, and I'm really excited to talk with you about regrowing vegetables from kitchen scraps. So again, my name is Mallory Traughber, and I have been in environmental education for the past 12 years, working primarily in the San Francisco Bay Area, where my nonprofit partners with school districts to install gardens in elementary schools and middle schools. So local teachers will sign up on our website, and then our team of staff and volunteers will come in to teach math, science, and social studies lessons in those spaces. So we will teach things like photosynthesis by planting and harvesting and cooking vegetable soup gardens. So I am an absolute vegetable enthusiast. I love broccoli, I love asparagus, I love all of my leafy greens, but I will be honest with you today that beets are not my favorite. So if you happen to have an excellent beet recipe to change my mind, please share that in the chat box. I often hear that I am missing out, and I would love to grow in that area. All right. Oh, and these are a couple of my favorite pictures of some of my little friends that are learning to grow their own food. So on the left, you will see a mighty kale man, and some of my kinder friends over on the right who are planting their own vegetable gardens. And so for many of us, getting outside, interacting with the natural world, it rejuvenates us, it calms our anxiety, and it's a part of our self-care routine. Just getting in that walk around the block right now can do so much to boost your mood, but our current situation of shelter in place, for many of us, myself included, has us bound a bit more to maybe a city apartment and spending dramatically less time outdoors, more time indoors, and really limiting our interactions with nature. So I'm really proud of you for joining us today, for taking this time for yourself to learn how to make the absolute most out of your kitchen vegetables and plants, and how to find some joy in what you grow on your own. All right, let's get started. I love this quote. There are no gardening mistakes, only experiments. So we may think, or we may say about ourselves, I don't have a green thumb, I can't keep my houseplants alive, growing is not for me. But I want to encourage you, because I've learned so much just from trying things out. And I'll be sharing some of those pitfalls with you today of some things that you can avoid to set you up for success. Show you some techniques that really work when it comes to regrowing food in your kitchen. And I do think that just having something to care for right now can bring such joy and happiness and a real sense of accomplishment. It really is a joy to check in on your plants every day to see how their regrowth is progressing. I love to wake up every morning and go down to my window over by my living room, where I keep some of my plants that are regrowing, and I love to see how they're doing and see how they've sprouted. I'm like, oh, are they growing today? Let's check in. All right, so this is what we're going to be covering today. We're going to talk about some super easy vegetables that you can regrow indoors with just water and sunlight. We're going to talk about some herbs that can be regrown with a little bit more TLC. And then my slideshow is going to end, and I'm going to walk you through and show you some techniques of how you can start seeds inside of your home, and how to make your own seed starter pots with minimal materials. And this is fun for home gardeners, it's fun for kids, I think it's fun for the whole family, anyone who's interested in regrowing. Great, so let's start with 5 easy vegetables to grow indoors. And we are going to start with the all-star of the shelter in place. I've seen so many posts and pictures of people who've had success in finding some joy in regrowing scallions. So scallions, when you buy them at the supermarket, they are still full of life, and you can continue to bring the life out of them by simply placing their roots in water. It is easy peasy. Let me show you how. All right, so what you're going to do first is save the bottom 2 inches of the roots. So once you cut off the tops for your cooking, save the bottom 2 inches. I like to save it right where the white of the scallion starts to turn into a pale green. You're going to place those roots in a shallow cup of water where it will receive plenty of sunlight. And this is going to grow quickly. It's shocking, I think, how quickly it's going to regrow. But the trick to getting it to regrow is replacing the water at least every 2 to 3 days. I think every other day is a good general rule of thumb. And as far as the container goes, I think a clear glass works perfectly. A shot glass actually works really well because they can lean along the side there. And then you can cut them as you need them. You can just continue to trim them and it'll keep regrowing. I wanted to give my scallions a more permanent home. And so after my roots, after it started to shoot up and grow more, I transplanted them into a pot of soil. And this will keep you in a pretty steady supply of green onions. And we know that when you buy green onions at the market, they are pretty cheap. But if you can regrow them and have a supply on your own at home, that saves you about 12 bucks a year, which I think is pretty cool. So this is a perfect one, vegetable to start with and get it to continue to regrow. So that's scallions. We're gonna move on to romaine lettuce. So surprising to me, but there is still life in romaine lettuce after you cut off the top leafy greens in your salad. So let's take a look how to do that. So once you chop off the lettuce and you're left with just the hard white stem, there's still something to it. So it will root if given water. So what you're gonna do is save the bottom inch from the roots and then leave it in a snug bowl. I think that the half-pint mason jars work really well for this. Even something like this would also work really well. This is an old jam jar. And then it's going to grow pretty quickly. You should see some regrowth by the next day. This is also a really satisfying vegetable to regrow because the growth happens so quickly. For this one, it will max out in about 10 to 12 days. So I don't want you to get your hopes up that you're gonna get a full head of romaine lettuce again, but you will get enough for a small salad for one, which is pretty cool. So that's a whole other meal that you can get out of something that you're purchasing anyway. And then a great water-wise tip, and this is really true for watering in any plant, is to replace the water early in the morning or early in the evening to avoid evaporation. If romaine lettuce perhaps is not for you, that's not your favorite, it's your personal beets, then you can do the same thing with bok choy. So you follow the same exact instructions, put it in a snug jar, fill it halfway with water, save the bottom inch for bok choy or for romaine lettuce. Moving on to celery. So I don't know about you, but celery is one of those vegetables that's just hard to keep in my kitchen. I find that it's pretty quick to get wilty. I don't use it fast enough. And so for me, it's a very cool one to get to regrow and get some more life out of it. And the way that you regrow celery is to save the bottom 1.5 to 2 inches from the roots. You're going to leave it in a shallow cup of water. So leave about 1 inch of water in the bottom, and then change the water every 1 to 2 days. And you're gonna start to watch in the middle of that celery, new shoots are gonna grow right in the middle, and they're a really lovely dark green color. You're gonna have to peel back and toss out the outer layers of the celery as they rot, or it will get rather slimy. It can get a little stinky, so you wanna stay on top of the care of the celery by changing out the water and peeling out the layers as you go. This celery can also be transplanted to soil after 3 weeks in this small container. So we know that one of the key functions of roots is to draw moisture, to draw oxygen and nutrients from the soil, and they actually do this throughout their entire life cycle of the plant. So when you transplant your plants into soil, the roots will grow bigger and have a greater opportunity to perform this function. So it's not necessary to transplant them to soil, but if you want them to reach their full potential, you can do that with celery. Leeks, one of my favorite. I love leeks. They're so handy to have around your kitchen. It's a very versatile vegetable. You can steam them, you can grill them, you can use them in soups and stews, you can put them in your eggs, and they're a really great source of vitamins A and C and iron. And they are a lot of fun to regrow. Check it out. Just like scallions, except you're gonna save a little bit more of the vegetable. So you wanna save the bottom 2 to 3 inches from the root. Make the cut there. You will leave it in a shallow cup of water. And this is also gonna grow pretty quickly. It's really fun to watch after just a couple of days, new shoots to come out of the leeks. And then after it has started to regrow, you can also transplant this to soil if you like. So just like scallions, you can cut it off as you need it and see how long you can keep it growing by refreshing the water and trimming as it goes. It does have to be trimmed if you want it to keep regrowing. Last but not least of our 5 easy vegetables to regrow is carrot greens. And I say yay to carrot greens. And I want to set up your expectations here. You will not be able to grow a whole new carrot. However, you can regrow the greens, which is awesome. Folks love carrot greens in pesto recipes and in salads. There are lots of creative ways you can use the top of the carrots that some of us just toss into the compost. So if you're unfamiliar with how to cook carrot greens, I would suggest a Google recipes of carrot greens and you might find some tasty things out there. If you want to regrow them, what you're going to do is chop off the top of the carrots, reserve an inch of the top, about an inch. You're going to place it in a shallow container of water and then put it in a sunny location. And I would think saucer for this one. I think a saucer or a very shallow bowl works perfectly. Again, no new carrots, but carrot greens are going to start to form in about a week. And again, I want to point out, as you can see in my picture, when I regrew my carrot greens at home, you want to leave the eyes on the side where roots will appear, and don't let the water get stagnant. So with the other ones that we've talked about so far, romaine lettuce, leeks, celery, and scallions, you could wait every other day to change the water. But if you do want to regrow carrot greens, I would suggest changing the water every day. That one needs a little bit more attention. And you can use the same method for other vegetables in the turnip family. So if you want to try this out with turnips or parsnips or even beets, if you are into that kind of thing, you can even regrow the tops. All right, so let's talk about some pro tips. Normally, you're only going to get 1 harvest from regrowth. You've got to keep fresh water in the cups or replant them in the dirt. A good rule of thumb is to replace the water in the cups at least every other day. And a water-wise tip, I would say, is to replace the water early in the morning or early in the evening to prevent evaporation. You want to leave enough roots when cutting so you get a good length to balance between the water and the top root cut. So don't cut too short. Don't be afraid to cut where I was mentioning, don't even be afraid to pull out a ruler if you're really unsure. And then finally, just give it time. So don't be discouraged if you don't see results right away. Think about maybe you've placed it in a location where it's not getting enough sunlight, or maybe it just needs a little bit more time for it to start to sprout and regrow. So don't be discouraged. Again, no mistakes in gardening, only experiments. Keep trying and seeing what you can make happen. So that was our 5 easy vegetables to regrow indoors. And now let's switch gears and talk about herbs. Herbs are the friend of the physician and the pride of the cooks. There are countless health benefits to using fresh herbs in your cooking, and storing fresh herbs in your kitchen is just lovely. It saves you time, it saves you money, gives your kitchen a very pleasant look and smell. And the herbs that we're going to talk about today can be grown again by regrowing stems from roots and water and then transplanting them to a more permanent soil pot. So today we will take a look at cilantro, basil, mint, parsley, and chives. I'm getting hungry. It's too close to lunchtime. Just thinking about this. Okay, I'm going to start with a very divisive herb of cilantro. Maybe you're like me and you love it. You're blessed to not have the genetic makeup to make it taste like soap. I know some of us are like, oh, not for me, but I do love cilantro because it's a great source of antioxidants. It contains vitamin C, and it's a great flavor food to promote using less sodium in your cooking as well. Cilantro regrows roots, and you can grow new plants of cilantro after you replant it. And let me show you how. So this is what I did at home. Super easy. I took some of the healthiest stems of cilantro from my bunch, and I placed those stems in a jar. Again, 1/2 pint mason jar is perfect. I put that jar in a sunny area, and then I changed the water every other day. After several days, on the bottom of those stems, new roots started to form. And I needed to see about 2 inches of new roots on those stems before I take those new shoots and then place them into a more permanent location of a pot of soil. And then in a few months' time, you are gonna have a new full-grown plant if you use this method. You can keep harvesting the leaves as you need, but I wouldn't strip the stems completely, just harvest as you go and as you need. Super fun to regrow this one once you are able to pull the new roots out of those stems by leaving it in a jar of water in your window. Easy peasy. All right, and I just realized I think we're going in my favorite order of all of these herbs. And I love basil. It is so good for digestion. It's anti-inflammatory, and fresh basil is just a lovely staple to have around your kitchen for pestos and pastas and pizzas, all kinds of ways to utilize it. And I used a similar technique to regrow my basil. So what you do is you pick several stems from the bunch and then strip the leaves about 3/4 of the stem. You want to strip that stem using a sharp knife, a sharp, clean knife. Again, you're going to place the stems in a jar of water, put it in a sunny window, but make sure it's not too hot because basil is quick to get wilty. So maybe a window that gets partial light would be preferable for this one. And again, change the water every other day. You're going to start to see new roots growing. That'll be about 2 inches long before you replant them. And with basil, what you can actually do is replant these stems into individual 4-inch pots. And then you'll have individual basil plants. What a nice gift to give out. Maybe you have an event coming up and you want to give everyone their own little basil plant. It's an easy one to regrow, and it's a lovely thing to have. If basil is not for you, you can use this exact same method for mint. So do the same thing, follow the same instructions, and regrow mint. Now, I want to turn on my audio here and show you a video. And I do want to show you this video because harvesting basil correctly is incredibly important for the longevity of the plant. And I find that it's not always harvested correctly, but you can keep your plant healthier for longer if you do know how to do this. So what I'm going to do now, and thanks for your patience, everybody, I'm going to share my computer sound. And if Nicole, if you don't mind to just give me a thumbs up so I know that the sound is working, I'm going to go ahead and press play here.
Hi, I'm Ashley, and today I'm going to show you how to harvest your basil plants. Now, basil plants love to be pruned. The more you harvest them, the more they're going to grow. Now, if you need to make pesto, or if you want to trim them to make them a nice healthy plant, you're going to trim 1/4 of an inch above a node. A node is where these little leaves actually start coming out from the stem. I'm going to take my scissors, just pinch about 1/4 of an inch above that. Now you can take your stems and trim down longer, and I wouldn't store your basil in the refrigerator. They have very tender leaves. They prefer to be in a glass jar with water at room temperature.
Great. And Nicole, are we back on my screen? Great. Thank you so much. Pull up. Awesome. Yeah, so hopefully that was helpful to see exactly where to trim the basil to keep the longevity of the plant, to keep it growing for as long as you possibly can. It's a lovely plant to have around and pretty easy to care for once you know where to make those crucial cuts. Okay, parsley. Parsley is it's a unique herb. It's a biennial, which means it only grows for 2 gardening seasons before it dies. And that means it starts to bolt or go to seed in its second season, its second year. But but if you'd like to regrow it, you're going to follow a pretty similar technique. So you're going to cut the stems of parsley 3 to 4 inches long and leave leaves on the top for regrowth. You'll place those stems in a jar of water, put the jar in a sunny window, and then change the water every other day before you can transfer the stems to soil once plenty of roots form. And I want to clarify too, with the cilantro and the parsley, once plenty of roots form, I would probably plant all of those together in my more permanent location of a pot of soil. But for my basil, I would plant them individually in 4-inch pots. All right, and our last herb we're going to talk about is chives. So chives are a great starter herbs for cooks to have in the kitchen. They're like the mild cousin of green onions. That's how I would describe them. However, they do not grow well from cuttings. So if you're interested in having a permanent supply of herbs, what I would recommend and what I do is to just buy chives from the supermarket where they're still attached to the bulb, and then plant that and leave that new container of chives in a sunny window near your kitchen. Make sure that it gets enough light, but the wonderful thing about chives is that they're more drought resistant. So they just need to be watered every few days, and they do have to be kind of trimmed back and cut as it starts to grow, or the roots won't take. But if you are new to regrowing things, and if you're new to plant care or not as confident, I would suggest starting with chives. I think it's a lovely herb to have in your kitchen for all of those reasons. And the care of it is pretty easy. Just keep cutting it back and make sure it gets water every few days. Okay, let's talk about storing herbs when you do purchase them from the store, or maybe when you harvest them from your garden. You want to treat your herbs like bouquets of flowers, just like the video is talking about. You want to place them in a cup of water, and some herbs you do want to store in the fridge. And you can also put a loose plastic wrap around them. That's what my mother likes to do, put plastic wrap around it, because she swears that they keep longer that way. Cilantro in particular really likes to be stored in the cool fridge. I keep parsley in there too, but you could absolutely let that just stay on your counter. And remember, basil is one not to keep in the fridge. It does not react well to the cold. It's going to wilt very quickly. So keep room temperature water and store that in your kitchen at room temperature. And if you do start storing herbs this way, you're going to start to realize you're purchasing them less frequently. They can stay up to 2 weeks if you properly care for them. You can't just put the herbs in a cup of water and leave them in the fridge and forget about them. You do have to change out the water as it starts to get foggy or stagnant. So treat them like the beautiful herbs that they are, like a bouquet of flowers. All right, I really want to throw this in there because now that you're regrowing vegetables and regrowing herbs, there's another wonderful way to extend the life of your kitchen scraps and peels before you throw it in the compost, and that's to save them for making your own vegetable stock. This is so easy, it's a no-brainer, and I want to show you, if you've never made your own vegetable stock today, how to do this today. So making vegetable stock, it's a great way to avoid wasting food. It's economical, and it just, I think, tastes so much better when it's homemade. It's one of those things that is just so much more delicious when you've made it yourself, when it doesn't come from a carton. So let's talk about how to save vegetables for stock, what vegetables to save, which vegetables are just best to avoid, and then finally how to cook delicious stock. This is how you do it. So what you're gonna do is save all of your scraps, rinse and chop them all to a similar size, and then store them in a gallon-size resealable bag in the freezer. Write the date on the bag with a Sharpie, because those scraps can stay in your freezer for about 6 months. You can just keep collecting things in that bag as you're cooking. And you want to save 4 cups of scraps to make 2 quarts of stock. So once my gallon bag of scraps starts to get pretty full, I know I'm ready to make my stock. These are the vegetables that I like to save for stock. And I save the roots, the stalks, the leaves, and the peelings. So I'm saving things like onion skins, carrots, celery, garlic, fennel, chard. I save potato skins, bell peppers. I save mushrooms, stems, parsley stems, leeks, and squash. And these are the vegetables that are just best to avoid for stock. I think you can just go ahead and put these scraps in your compost bin because their flavors are gonna overpower your stock. So you want to avoid cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, turnips, artichokes, beetroots, and anything spoiled. If it's getting wilted or spoiled, just go ahead and put it in your compost bin. Don't worry about saving it for a stock. So once that bag starts to get nice and full, what you're gonna do is pour all of those vegetables into a large pot. Your large pasta pot or your Dutch oven is perfect. You're going to cover the vegetables with water just until they start to float, and then bring it to a boil. Once it starts to boil, go ahead and bring the heat down to low, let it simmer for about 30 minutes, and then you're gonna strain out all the vegetables, discard it. Now you can go ahead and put it in the compost. And then you've got your delicious stock. And what's wonderful about it is it can stay in your fridge for only 3 to 4 days, but you can freeze the stock for up to 3 months. And maybe you don't have enough Tupperware to keep all of that stock. So a wonderful thing to do is let it cool and then pour the stock into ice cube trays. Freeze the ice cube trays, and now you can put all of those stock cubes, as they are now, in a resealable gallon bag. And then you've got stock on hand to pop out anytime you need it in your cooking. Lovely to use for rice and all kinds of things. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that's an easy tip of how to extend the life of your vegetables, give them one more life with stock. All right, everyone. So we have covered vegetables and herbs to regrow, how to save peels for vegetable stock, and now we're going to turn to seeds. We're going to talk about how to save them and how to plant them. And another lovely quote, don't judge each day by the harvest that you reap, but by the seeds that you plant. So we're going to talk about the tomato seed saving process. And this is a picture of from a class of second graders that I've taught. We've planted our own tomato seeds after going through the whole year-long process of how to save them, but I'll show you how to do that quickly. And because tomato seeds, this is a fun fact that our students always really enjoy, because the tomato has seeds and it grows from a flowering plant, botanically it's classified as a fruit and not a vegetable, which they always think is so interesting. And to encourage any young people in your life to eat tomatoes, you can remind them that there are over 10,000 varieties of tomatoes grown worldwide. So hopefully there's one variety out there that maybe they just haven't tried yet and they might really enjoy. You can also tell them that we've also grown tomato seedlings in space before, which is pretty cool. So we're going to talk about the tomato seed saving process. We're going to talk about how to save citrus seeds, how to grow a lovely houseplant of a little baby lemon tree. We'll talk about how to grow strawberry plants, which is another wonderful perennial, which means that if you plant it now, it's going to come back next year and the following year and the year after that. And even though it might not give you fruit immediately, once it does, it remains active for 5 years. So it's a wonderful thing to have because on average, Americans eat, I think, 3.5 pounds of fresh strawberries every year. So that's a wonderful thing to have on hand if you can grow it yourself. Also, I love this too, that there was a study that polled a group of 9-year-olds and over half of them said strawberries is their favorite fruit because it really is nature's candy. So we'll talk about how to regrow that or how to grow them from seeds as well. And then finally, I want to show you how to make your own seed starter pots from minimal materials. So if you want to follow along with me today to do that, we're going to use newspaper, soil, an aluminum can, seeds, a marker, masking tape, and water. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop my share so you can go ahead and see me making these seed pots. All right. And then Nicole, thumbs up. Is it just me on the screen now? All right. Let me readjust here and move my computer up, bring it down to the table so you can follow along. All right, so now I'm on Spotlight. Perfect. Okay, so I want to show you first how to save your tomato seeds. Tomato seeds, this is one of my favorite things to do with the kiddos that I teach. And also, I'm going to share this PDF with you today for how to make your own seed envelope. So now that you're regrowing things, you've got more seeds, maybe you want to start saving them for the season when it's best to plant them. And I really love this little envelope. So this is a piece of paper you can print out and you cut the tabs and glue it. You can write down the date and the variety, and then you'll always have your seeds on hand when the time comes around to plant them. So for my tomato seeds, what I do is I squish those tomatoes and I'm going to put them in a cup of water. And once I put the tomatoes seeds in the cup, I'm going to put a bit more water on top of it just to double the amount of juice that's in it. What I like to do to speed up the process is cover it with plastic wrap, put a rubber band around it, and then just let it sit for about a week or two. And what's going to happen, which is really cool, it's a cool science experiment to do in your kitchen, all of this yeast is going to form inside of the cup. and that yeast is going to eat away the jelly coat of the seeds. All of the viable seeds, the good seeds that could grow into new tomato seedlings, they're going to sink to the bottom. That's how you know they're good. The ones that are not viable, that would not be great starters, are going to still be floating at the top after that 2-week time. So you're going to drain out all those seeds, get the good seeds from the bottom and rinse them off. Now they're not jelly anymore, they're nice and smooth, and you can let them dry. Once they're nice and dry, put them in your own seed envelope until it's time to plant them. So I've got my seeds here, and I want to show you how I would replant them and start them today. So this is what I would do. I'm going to use minimal materials. I don't even need to go to the nursery. I've got everything I need at home. So I'm going to start with a piece of newspaper, and I'm going to cut my newspaper into a 4-inch strip, just like this. What's really wonderful, everybody, about these newspaper pots is they're biodegradable. So after you start your seeds in these pots, you could theoretically go ahead and plant the whole pot in the garden and let it disintegrate, which is really cool. So I'm going to take this here, and I'm going to use a can. So you can use a full-size can. You can use a smaller can if you like, if you want to start up many seeds and you want more space. So I'm going to take my can and put it halfway down the strip and roll it all the way down like this. And now I'm going to push down the bottom so it covers the bottom of the can completely. Now I'm going to put this on my table, and I'm going to spin it around a few times so my new newspaper pot can take shape. I'm going to take my can out, and voila, beautiful. I'm going to take a little blue tape because it's easy to remove it. I'm going to use the blue tape to hold down the stem and the bottom. Just like this. Okay, now I'm going to take my Sharpie.
Watch this go something and kind of like, I don't know how to take it. So,
oh, I think someone's on unmute.
He said,
all right, I'm going to put that tape over the seam like this, and I'm going to write what I planted inside of it. And this is my zebra heirloom tomato seeds. But if you're doing this with a class of kids or a bunch of kids at home, maybe you would want to write their name on it so they know which one is theirs. That's a great one too. So I've got my pot made. I've got my tape on it that I can take off later just so I know what I'm putting inside of it. And now I'm going to fill it up with soil. I've got a little container here ready to go. You can use a trowel, but I don't mind getting my hands dirty. Go ahead and fill that up. And I'm going to fill it up pretty close to the top, maybe leave a 1/2 inch at the top. Just like this. Okay, now I've got my seeds here. Let me wash my hands off. And now with my seeds, I'm going to plant it about a knuckle deep. And when I do this with kiddos, it's always really disappointing if it doesn't sprout. And so I always give them a couple, about 2 seeds, so they can go ahead and, there we go, give them 2 seeds. So in case one isn't viable, hopefully the other one will sprout. I like to use a spray water gun when I'm doing this with kiddos too, and tell them give it 5 good sprays. I'm just going to use some water today. But a great tip, if you're doing a bunch of these, what I would do is actually put these little pots in a shallow bowl of water, and then you can pour the water into the bowl itself. And that's a great way to prevent a mess like I'm making over here. So that's how I grow my tomato seeds. I've also seen folks have success. This is pretty cool. They take a slice of the actual tomato and put that into a pot, cover that up with soil, and just continue to water it. And now they've got new seedlings of tomato plants. But maybe it's not the season for it and you're not ready to put those in your garden. So you want to use this method instead until it's time. All right, so those are tomatoes. Let's take a look at lemons. So I did this presentation on Earth Day, and I want to show you because I planted this little lemon seed on Earth Day, and check it out. In just a few weeks, I've got a beautiful paper cup lemon tree. I think this is a really lovely house plant. It's a really cool little DIY house plant you could have around your home. It's just a lovely green color, and it's been pretty hardy and easy to keep alive so far. So let me show you, if you want to start your own little lemon tree, how to do that. So you're going to take lemons. I would use an organic lemon, and I would remove the seeds, about 10 or so seeds, and pick the seed, the largest seed that you can find that's the whitest in color. And now you're going to take those seeds and maybe put them on a damp napkin after you've rinsed them off. You want to rinse them off completely because any sugar that's left on the seed, it'll create like a fungus that will harm the baby seedling, and it'll be difficult for the seedling to start to grow. So you want to get a well-rinsed seed from your lemon, rinse it completely off, make sure it's the largest and the whitest one from that lemon, and then you want to keep it moist until you're ready to plant it. So you could put it, what I did last night is I just put this in a moist napkin and then folded it up, and I left it in my refrigerator to keep it cool until I was ready to plant it. And now what you can do, if you want to try this at home, I think mine is ready for a larger pot. I'm so excited to transplant this into a more permanent home. But what you can do is take a cup, a plastic cup like this, and you want to cut down to the bottom. A paper cup is fine too. This is just what I happen to have on hand. I'm going to cut all the way around it. And I'm left with the bottom of the cup that I can now put in a separate cup so I can have some drainage holes. So what you can do, and I've already done it on this cup here, is you can poke with an X-Acto knife, poke little holes inside of it, and then place this in the bottom. And now you're ready to fill this up with soil and plant your seeds. Another wonderful thing you can do, let me show you this as well, is fill this up with soil. We'll use my Traughber for this. Fill this up with soil. And I want to show you that you can take the top of a cup like this and create your own DIY greenhouse. The way I was able to make my little tomato plant sprout so quickly is because I left it in a sunny window with the bottom of a cup on top of it like this. And it created a DIY greenhouse effect, and it allowed it to sprout pretty quickly. And you could also use the bottom of I would say like a 20-ounce soda bottle, take the bottom of that and cut it and put that on top of your paper cup. It's a wonderful way to create your own little greenhouse indoors when you maybe have limited space. Another great trick from the classroom is you can use a tennis tube to also create a DIY greenhouse effect. And I do this with my kiddos as well. I put 1/3 of a cup of sand on the bottom and then 1/2 a cup of soil. And then I put in about a teaspoon of grass seeds, and we're doing a water cycle experiment this way. And we water it as well. So we put 1/2 a cup of water in before we put the lid on. And then we noticed that without even having to take the lid off, our grass is going to start to grow in the tennis tube. So you can get that same effect to show the water cycle. And I'm wondering too, if you might be able to try this with chives. I wonder if you could try the same thing to grow chives and then transplant them to a more permanent location. That might be a neat thing to try, to just throw them in and see how it goes. No mistakes in gardening, only experiments. See what you can make happen. So we talked about the tomatoes and the lemon seeds. And again, want to hit home, make sure that they are moist. So you can't plant these lemon seeds unless they're still a little bit moist after you've cleaned off all the sugar. And then the last one we're going to talk about today is the strawberry. All right, so strawberries could have up to 200 seeds. That's so many seeds on a strawberry. And this is such a favorite fruit for so many kiddos in particular. We really like to have it grow in our school gardens so they can just go and help themselves to it all the time. In a way, a fun way to keep them busy too, to get all the seeds to remove them from the strawberry is with a toothpick. So you can do it this way. For adults who maybe want to speed this up a little bit, what you could do is just cut thin slices and lay them out overnight. So you can remove as many seeds as possible, and then you're going to want to rinse them, make sure they're nice and dry. And then once you've got a handful of these little seeds, you can grow them in a cup. So I would take, just like I showed you before, I would take the top or the bottom of the cup with the holes poked into it, and I would put that at the bottom, fill it up with soil, and then sprinkle my seeds inside. They're going to start to grow after a couple of days. My strawberry seeds will start to grow, and I would leave them in here for about 6 weeks until I would transplant them to a more permanent location. And again, if you take care of strawberries, they will take care of you. Your strawberry plant can continue to give you fruit for 5 years after you plant it, which is pretty incredible. I've got a little time here to show you another trick that is not on my presentation, but I think is really cool. So we've started our tomato seeds, we started our citrus seeds, and we've learned how to save the strawberry seeds. Remember, keep these nice and dry before you plant them in your paper cup or your plastic cup. But I think garlic, if you do have access to some gardening space, you've got a sunny area, and if you want to regrow garlic, this one takes a little bit more TLC. But what I'm going to do is take some of my garlic cloves, and I want to put them root down, pointy part up, and I'm going to crowd many of them into my jar, and then I'm going to pour a little bit of water into it. And now after my garlic starts to show roots, and I'm looking for maybe, you know, 1/2 centimeter to 1 centimeter of roots, once they've started to grow roots, I can go ahead and transplant these into the soil. And I would grow them in the soil at least 6 inches apart and keep them watered. And then after, you know, several weeks, I'm going to be able to harvest them. So if you want to start your own garlic without purchasing the garlic bulbs from the store, why don't you just save them from your kitchen? If you've got too much, go ahead and let the roots grow in a jar of water and then transplant them from there. That's a great thing to do. So I see that it is 12:50. I'm going to, let's see here. I want to turn it back on over to Nicole for any questions and answers. And before we start that, I do want to say that I hope that you found a few tricks today that you're like, oh, I can try that. Maybe I don't have a green thumb, but that's one I definitely can do. I can make newspaper pots with my kids, or I can regrow scallions, or maybe I want to start my own little lemon tree. And before we start this Q&A too, I will not pretend to have all the answers, but I have had some luck trying these things at home. And if I don't have your answers, I'm happy to help you find them. And if you have a question that's along the lines of, will this work with this? I would say try it. It's an experiment. See what you can make happen and find some joy in your kitchen. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over to Nicole.
Yes, thank you, Mallory. It was great. I'm a seasoned gardener, but I learned so much. So thank you. Awesome. I'm going to put a link to the survey in the chat. So please, everyone, fill out that survey, because that helps us, just really guides us on what programs and classes you are interested in, and it lets the funders know that you appreciate these types of classes. And so the link's in the chat. And then if you have any questions, raise your hand and I'll unmute you and you can ask your question directly to Mallory. Yeah, not this hand, it's the one in the participants. So we are gonna start with, here we go, Gina Shaw. Hello.
Again, everyone.
Hi, it's Gina.
Gina,
Hi,
sorry,
Gina.
That's okay. Hi, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. Because we're in, early June now, and I was wondering what food scraps or seeds that we've somehow managed to make into plants in water, is it appropriate to plant in the soil for this season? So what's what's this a good season to plant?
And can I ask where you're located?
I'm in Oakland,
Oh, in
California.
Oakland. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
so
Yeah.
local. Yeah.
Awesome. I think the vegetables that I was talking about in the beginning of the presentation, so your scallions, leeks, I would continue to grow those. For myself, I don't have access to any outdoor space. I'm in an apartment, but I am fortunate to have a very sunny window. So I keep growing my leeks and my scallions indoors, and I think it's a fine time to do that because I'm able to control the temperature. And I've seen on blogs, which is mind-boggling to me, that folks have been able to keep their scallions alive for over a year. One woman even claimed, as she continued to trim them, to be able to do that for 2 years, which is just so cool. And now with celery, and what was the other one we talked about taking outside? Oh, and with if you're regrowing your romaine lettuce or your bok choy, you're only going to get one more life out of it, so I wouldn't bother with taking that outside. But you could certainly try to replant your celery outside. I would give it a go.
Like cherry tomato, can I cut it in half and just put it in the soil now? Because it seems like it's a good time for tomato and the seeds are already in the cherry tomato.
Well, give it a try. We're lucky in the Bay Area to have a long growing season. In our school gardens, we really plant our tomatoes in late April and then all throughout May and even a bit into June. So I say go for it. Absolutely. But you want to make sure to use that method that we talked about because you want to let the jelly coat of the seeds, that needs to be removed. So squeeze your tomatoes. Don't let the pulp get in the cup, but the seeds and the juice, get that into a cup and then pour some water into it. If you want to speed it up with the plastic wrap and the rubber band, once the yeast forms and your seeds sink to the bottom, then you're going to know it's time to take them out and let them dry. Once they're dry, you can replant them. I think that's a great thing to do with cherry tomatoes. Let me know how it goes.
Thank you.
Yeah. And now we've got Karen. So I'm going to unmute you, Karen. Karen?
Yes.
Hi, Karen.
Hi. What kind of soil did you use for your seeds?
Oh, great question. I'm using just a high quality potting soil. But you know what? During the shelter in place, we weren't able to go. I also live with someone immunocompromised, so we weren't able to go to the nursery to purchase any potting soil. So we just used repurposed some soil from houseplants, and that's actually what my little lemon tree is growing out of, which is pretty cool. But if you do have access, I think a high quality potting soil is great. And if you also have access to combine that with organic matter, so if you can get some compost to either mix in with the potting soil or to put on top about 1/2 inch, your plant will love it. That is a natural fertilizer that'll really make it take off. But also, if you don't have compost, don't let that be a detriment to just trying it out.
Thank you.
You got it. Thanks for the question, Karen.
All right, let's go to, all right, Iris.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Iris.
Hey, thanks for all of the information. This was a very interesting session. My question is, so I'm living in Woodland right now, but I'm moving to Philadelphia and it's significantly more humid over there. So I was kind of just wondering if anybody has experience or tips on how to circumvent any issues that might arise with higher humidity and regrowing stuff, or if that's even a problem to begin with.
I wonder if Nicole has some input on this because she's up in Solano County, but I would say that early morning and early evening watering is best for evaporation and watering every day. So really getting to know your plants and taking care of them. Nicole, do you have any other tips when it comes to the heat?
The humidity, I mean, it's
Humidity?
a totally different environment. I actually lived in Jersey, and it's, the thing is you actually don't need to water as much, but it's very seasonal, right?
Got it.
You'll get summer rains there, where here it's more of the climate's different, but it's a totally different experience there. So just, I mean, you'll research each gardening area has different zones, and so you'll start researching the zones, and yeah, it's definitely seasonal. You're not going to grow during the winter there, but it's exciting. Yeah, thanks, Iris.
Thank you.
Okay, let's let's go to Tamar. Let's unmute Tamar. Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Smart.
Hi, thank you so much for all of your wisdom and information. Learning a lot, but I had a quick question about the lemon tree process.
Sure.
And so I noticed that you talked about doing the greenhouse effect by cutting the top of another cup and putting it on top. And so is that after I already put the lemon seeds in the soil, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So once I've filled my cup up with soil and I got it, I left some room at the top here, I planted my seeds and I planted them about a knuckle deep and then covered that up with soil. And again, if you have access to some compost on top, that's a great thing to do, but not necessary if you don't. And then I took the top of my cup, where did I put it? And then I could take the top of my cup and then put that on top. And then once it started to sprout, I didn't really need this anymore, so I can move that to the side and now to start to water my little sprout every day. And I was doing that every time I wanted to keep it moist, so anytime it started to dry out, I would water it at least every other day. And I'm just so thrilled with it. I think it's such a beautiful little house plant. I'm gonna put it in a nice pot and see how I can keep it growing. And a buddy of mine actually tried this when we moved to San Francisco 7 years ago, and now his little plant is in like one of those large half wine barrels on his balcony. So he doesn't have lemons yet, but he's just done a really fun thing for him to keep growing like as he continues his journey in the city. So I think it's pretty fun. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, sorry, I just had another question that was a two-part. The second question was, you were talking about how the lemon tree is it can be transformed into a house plant in a way, at least for the first little bit. And so I was wondering if you know of any other plants that have a similar, that you would do a similar technique with the greenhouse and the cup and the newspaper, that type of technique for a plant that wouldn't be traditionally a house plant, but that's similar to the lemon tree.
Oh yeah, thanks Tamar for reminding me that I would also try this with other citrus fruits. So I would do the exact same thing with mandarins or limes, and I would make sure to rinse them really well to make sure that all the sugar is off so it doesn't harm the seedling as it grows. Keep it moist when I plant it, and then I would give that a try. So citrus seeds are what I would recommend, and I wonder if anyone else would suggest using other seeds in the chat box. I wonder if anyone has had success using a similar technique with anything else. Well, and I'm seeing something, what do you need to keep citrus seeds wet when you plant them? So what you do is I would put it in get a moist paper towel and then just kind of fold it up and put it in the fridge. And then when you're ready, take it out of the fridge and it's still damp and ready to be planted.
Okay, great, thank you.
No problem.
All right, Lena. Lena, you're on.
For onions that start sprouting, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Keep going, Lena.
Okay, so for onions that start sprouting, can you cut the middle out that's sprouting and sprout that? Regular, like yellow onions, red onions?
Yeah, I've got an onion I didn't have a chance to talk about today, but with onions that have started, my friend just sent me an incredible picture of a red onion that they left in the kitchen for too long that had like huge green sprouts out of it. And what they did is they went ahead and planted the whole onion in the garden and left the green sprouts out of the top. I hope that answers your question. But if you wanted to regrow an onion, what you could do is cut the sides off for your cooking and then leave that middle square and then put the roots down into the ground. So I would do it upside down, cover it with soil and let that grow.
Everyone, but you're holding it with roots up, so you mean roots down, right?
Oh yeah, I'm just trying to show you on my screen, but yeah, thank you.
The space for garlic when you plant it, was it 3 inches or 6 inches?
I do 6. I wonder if in the chat box anyone has a different opinion.
It just, I didn't remember the number. And then for the broth, if you can it, well, you didn't mention canning. So I'm wondering, if you can the broth, do I significantly reduce the nutritional value of the vegetable broth?
I have never canned because of very, very tight quarters in my kitchen. And I feel like I've just never used my stock so quickly too. So I don't know, I've always just kept it in the fridge, and if I'm not using it in the next few days, then it ends up in my freezer in ice cube trays, and then I can store it a little bit easier in a bag. Does anyone have any experience with canning their stock? We want to leave that in the chat box. That would be helpful if we could kind of brain share and give Lena an answer about that. That's a great question.
But it also implies that you use it as fast as you make it almost. So that's helpful to me. It goes in everything.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of things. Use it instead of water. Just, you know, utilize it is what I'm hearing from your response.
Right, Lena, I think my favorite way to use it right now is with rice, with brown rice. So instead of using water with the brown rice, I will use my vegetable stock, and I think it just has a much lovelier flavor. And I'm always just so excited to use the stock that I made. It ends up getting used very quickly because I waited so long to fill up that bag and save it. So it's a great thing to replace. Yeah, thanks for your question.
Thank you.
All right, Jessica. Hello, Jessica, you're on.
Hello, I just had a quick question. So my question was, is it best to move your starters into soil once the roots start coming out, or should you leave them in the water for a little longer?
That's such a good question. Personally, I would move them to soil because I would want to have a more permanent location for them and water the soil. To me, from the way that my home is laid out, I would have to like take them over to the sink and like dump the water, put new water in. It's nice to move them to soil once the roots come up. And you can let them continue to grow in herbs for as long as you can keep them that way, and they will stay that way for a while with as long as you don't let the water get stagnant. But it is fun to replant them in soil if you have access.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right, Sonia, you are on. Hello?
It once more and do more of it.
Hello?
Yeah, hi, this is Sunila here. Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, perfect. Quick one. I definitely want to thank you for this particular presentation. I think this was very helpful, and I got at least some confidence that I can, even though I don't have a green thumb, I can probably go and try it out. So
you can do it. You can experiment.
Absolutely. So I think I'm a lover of greens. So I saw all the initial ones and just had a question. I don't know whether the spinach, the chards, all those, do they also grow in the similar way, the roots, and then we can plant them, or how can they be done?
You want to regrow greens. I think the reason that romaine lettuce works is because that root is still attached. And so when you put that root into water, you're going to get one regrowth out of it after 10 to 12 days. For spinach, you're already cutting it. And with chard, I don't think you can regrow those things. And someone please correct me if I'm wrong, but my gut would say that those aren't possible for regrowth.
Okay. Yeah, but I'm gonna definitely try the cilantros, and I think those are definitely amazing. I think as well. So.
Oh yeah, it's too cool. That is pretty cool to be able to regrow your herbs again.
One last one is for the chilies. Do we also do the same thing with the chilies like we did for the tomatoes? How would the chilies plant grow with the seeds?
Oh yeah, cool question. I would restart my chilies in newspaper pots. Yeah, I would give that a try. Are you talking about like, is it, I think with tomatoes because,
go ahead. The Thai chili or something like that, the normal chilies that we use for cooking.
Yeah, experiment, give it a try. I would give it a try, yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, so the remaining questions with the hands up, could you please put your questions in the chat box, because Mallory has offered to write a little blog that answers the questions, and that'll be in our July newsletter. So that's a way we can get to all those questions. I think we have time for one more. Vicky. Vicky?
Hi, Vicky.
Hi, Vicky.
I don't have good light in my apartment and I don't have outdoor space. I was wondering if you had any advice about using grow lamps.
Oh yeah, we use grow lamps in my garden program. And we find like great results with that too. And we have a pretty cheap setup. I think we got something maybe for like $30 used, and it's worked great because we start a lot of things from seed in our program. So we'll start corn seedlings, and we start chard and lots of different vegetables with our grow lamp. But I will tell you, Vicki, though, my apartment also doesn't have great light, and I just kind of try a few things out, and it works out okay. Like, because I'm in the city, so in the Mission, sometimes I get sun for parts of the day, and sometimes I don't. But this was able to grow in a window that only gets sun for maybe 3 to 4 hours a day. So even if you have that limited amount.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think we have
Thank you.
For one more. Thanks, Vicki. Corinne, I'm going to unmute you. Corinne?
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Hi. Oh, cool background.
Oh, thank you. So my question was actually similar to that. I don't have a lot of light in my house, but I have a big backyard. Will most of these things survive in the Bay Area outside to regrow?
Yeah, all of these things I started in my apartment in the Bay Area with limited light. And then if I did have access to an outdoor space, I would transplant them out there once, like for my herbs, once my roots started to get about 2 inches long, or once things start to sprout. After my strawberries after they've been growing in the cup for 6 weeks, I'd move it outdoors, absolutely.
Okay, but if I can't find a good place in my house that gets the light, can I start them outside to grow the roots? Like in their little cups?
Yeah, give it a try.
Okay.
Give it a try.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corinne. So the remainder of people raising your hands, please put your questions in the chat box. And in our July newsletter, Mallory will answer those questions because there's such great questions. I want to stay here all day, but so thank you so much again. If you haven't had a chance, please fill out that survey. That helps us. And I wanted to show you really quick, I've got holy basil, which is 2 weeks of, or I don't know, 10 days to 2 weeks. There's so many roots on there. So it's easy. And it was just by cutting it off. And you can do that with tomatoes too. You can take suckers off of the tomatoes and reroot and then get a tomato plant that way. So there's such abundance in gardening. And I just encourage you all to start small and not strive for perfection. Thank you so much, Mallory, for all your insight. There's going to be research to be done for me because there's so many neat suggestions people have put in. So yeah, keep growing. Yep.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And I wish we could go into everybody's homes so they could show off their little experiments. I learned so much from everybody just telling me like, oh, you do it that way, but I try it like this and this works for me. So that's wonderful. It's been so much fun to share this with you all today. It's been lovely to partner with Sustainable Solano, and I wish you luck in your own experiments at home. And thank you so much for having me. This was lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody. Grow your own food, pass on your excess, take really good care of yourselves, and happy gardening. Bye guys.